Hello people, it is Joshua Future Filmmaker 3940 Reviews here, telling you guys a little introduction. By the time you guys see this on July 17th or 16th, I will have watched every film in the Fear Street Trilogy. I got early screeners to watch each of these movies. I missed my screener of the first movie, but I did not miss my screener of the second movie. And when I do have an early screener for the third movie, and I saw that one as well. So by the time you guys see this, all three reviews for each of the Fear Street movies will have already been shot and edited and ready to share with you. All three of these videos will be edited into one video, therefore giving you guys each of my thoughts on each film in the trilogy. I'm very excited to bring these reviews to you, and I hope you enjoy it. Fear Street Part 1 was directed by Leigh Janiak, co-written by Leigh Janiak, and written by Phil Graziado, based on the books of the same names written by RL Stine. Stars Olivia Scott Welch, Kiana Madera, Benjamin Flores Jr., Julia Rainwald, Frank Heisinger, and Ashley Zuckerman, and Daniel Brett Gibson, and Maya Hawke. In this first half of the Fear Street trilogy, a group of teenagers in Shadyside, Ohio, who are terrorized by an ancient evil responsible wearing a skull mask for a series of brutal murders that have been plagued the town for centuries. And so they go on a mission to try and stop the evil entity, and they decide to take on this evil force. When it comes to the Fear Street trilogy, when going into this, I am an RL Stine fan, as we all are. Goosebumps, I haven't read a lot of the books, but I've read most of the books during my elementary school days, middle school days, and my high school days. I enjoyed the two Goosebumps movies that came out in 2015, 2018. I'm still waiting to see if we're going to get a third Goosebumps movie, but who knows. The 90s TV show is a lot of fun. And the mostly ghostly movies, I enjoy those. So going into this, I went into this with some curiosity. It had my curiosity. I thought it sounded interesting for a trilogy. I said, was this Fear Street? A street that causes fear? But then when I saw trailers for this, I became immediately interested in the idea and the concept. And what a lot of cast members that I'm familiar with, like Sadie Sink and Maya Hawke and Benjamin Flores Jr. And initially, when these movies were going to come out last year, but due to the whole state of the world last year, they got delayed, and because of the whole Disney Fox acquisition, this was supposed to initially go into theaters as well as the other two. So Netflix decided to buy the rights to the three movies, and for 3 weeks, which includes this week, the first 3 weeks of July, they will play all 3Ds. And how I was able to watch these movies is that I took part in the giveaway by Mama's Geeky, aka Tessa. Her social media links will be in the description box down below. She's a great YouTuber, by the way. Definitely go check her out. She's very thankful to take a part in the giveaways to see early screeners for these. And when it came to this first one, I did miss the screener for it because I had trouble getting into it. But I was still able to watch it after, at least on Netflix. So I had to wait a whole extra hours to watch it on July 2nd. And I gotta tell you, this first half of Fear Street is really cool. This is a really cool start to the trilogy. Starting off with the idea. Again, I like the idea of a serial killer on in sunny Shadyside, Ohio, that has been around as an evil force, which some kind of curse, like witchcraft or something, or it's been plaguing their town for centuries. I like the concept. I like the idea. I think it's very good for a nice little slasher movie that not only appeals to adults but appeals to teenagers. I think it's very clever. It's very interesting. And I think they used this whole idea to the best of their advantage in this first part. When this first half was taking place in 1994, which the 90s, I did grow up in that era. So, late 90s. So, I'm a late 90s baby, as you could say. But going into this, when it started out, I was getting a lot of Scream vibes from the opening scene with Maya Hawke's character. And which I'm not surprised, because they did this movie. It's like if you took Scream, some of the scary movies from the 90s, and you took Stranger Things, mixed them together, and this is their love child. And even though this is a young adult movie, as I say, even though this is a young adult film based on a young adult novel, it's not afraid to get very creative or very violent with its kills. There is one kill in particular called the slice of bread kill, which is everyone's been calling it on the internet. That was very brutal. The kills were very creative and inventive. I felt a sense of scaredom, and I felt a sense of stakes that with these group of main characters, that they could actually get hurt, they could actually get killed. And also from the direction and cinematography and writing standpoint, those three are very on point. It does take place in the 90s, while they do have some modern day, even though they did shoot this in modern day. And I think the way they recreate the 90s, while they don't bring it a lot of 90s references and 90s nostalgia, I think they do a good enough job of what they can for the budget they had. And I was sold. I was into it. It's the first opening scene. I was into it. As the movie kept going, I was into it. I was enjoying it. And there was even times with this first half where I was just sitting there like creeped out, like what's gonna happen. Now, of course, the acting in this movie is good. The acting is good. Now, most of these actors you are familiar with, like Fred Hankinger or Ashley Zuckerman or Daryl Brett Gibson and Julian Jacobs, who plays a character that Sadie Sink's character, Sadie Sink plays, was the younger part of, in the next part. Maya Hawke, Benjamin Flores Jr., we're all familiar with those. But the rest of these other actors, these are some newcomers, and I think all the actors did a very great job. Maya Hawke definitely did a great job in the particular in the opening scene, in the opening kill scene. She was great in Stranger Things, she's great in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and she continues to show why she is having a great acting career, just like Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. The killer, I like his design. I do like the design of the killer. It's very creepy, and his mask was very creepy too. I thought it was that was a very convincing mask they went with the skulls. I'm like, this is creepy, but I was not once complaining. You get exactly what you paid to see, or which you want to see, especially from a Netflix movie. So I was very happy with how they did this. And also, for the 1 hour and 46 minutes, I was never bored. I wasn't bored. It just kept moving like Flashpoint, Paradox or something. Ultimately, yes, I do have two gripes. Yes, like I said, they don't bring in a lot more 90s references as you would expect. But I think they do a good enough job for what they require, but I think that's one of the issues. I do think they could have had a little bit more '90s nostalgia, like Blockbuster or Captain Video or such, or like Notorious B.I.G. And the soundtrack is awesome. The score is awesome, and I love the soundtrack for the movie is awesome. And even the tone is very well placed. Also, I will say another issue I do have is that some of the dialogue isn't always corny, isn't always great. There is some corny dialogue here and there, but you know what? This is how it was kind of in the '90s, so I can easily let it slide. And there's this whole subplot with the main character, of course, which her name is Dina, and this other girl's name is Samantha. There's this whole subplot with them where they were initially in love, which I didn't really think was necessary, but I see why it was there. But it didn't take me out of it. But at the end of the day, this first half of the Fear Street trilogy was a promising start to the Fear Street movies. It was great. I was enjoying it. I was intrigued. I was very intrigued, especially after that cliffhanger ending, to see what part 2 was going to be. And by the time you see this review, all 3 reviews for each movie will probably either be split up or just edit it into one video and just label it as the Fear Street reviews. And there'll be time links in the description box. You know what I'm trying to say. But at the end of the day, I'm very surprised with Fear Street Part 1 1994. This is definitely one of my favorite movies of the year, one of my favorite scary movies of the year, considering the fact that we haven't been getting that many scary movies as you want. It's not my favorite horror movie of the year. That still goes to A Quiet Place Part 2, but it got pretty close. And I'm gonna give Fear Street Part 1 almost my highest grade, which is the better than Vampire Academy. Yeah, I'll see you guys for Fear Street Part 2, 1978. I'm gonna stop this recording and go straight into the next one. Alright, so Fear Street Part 2, 1978 was directed by Leigh Janiak, co-written by her and 2 other writers, based on the series of books by RL Stine. And we are now into the 1978 portion of this trilogy movie review. This, of course, has the same returning players from 1994, as well as Gillian Jacobs as a older Ziggy, but stars Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, Ryan Simpkins, McCabe Sly, and Ted Sutherland. And in this movie, this takes place in the summer of 1978. And a summer of fun turns into a gruesome fight for survival as a killer terrorizes Camp Nightwing in the cursed town of Shadyside, Ohio. And so what they have to do in this sequel, 2 group of teenagers must come together to survive a possessed counselor's murder spree. Take it like RL Stine takes notes from Friday the 13th with a mix of Fear Street. So, after that awesome cliffhanger from the last movie, this, of course, we go into the past of the 1978, where we follow Gillian Jacobs' character, C. Berman, or adult Ziggy, except this time is played by the lovely Sadie Sink from Stranger Things, who is a very talented young up-and-coming star, as well as with Sophia Lillis and a bunch of other rising stars. Sadie Sink, of course, she is great here. But before I get into that, I wanted to say I did not miss my screener for this. I was not missing my screener for this, and I just gotta tell you, this is my favorite of the 2 so far. Partly because it's more of a Friday the 13th like scenario. Here we see the struggles that this character's going through, and so of course we get to know what Ziggy really is, or C. Berman. And so we do get to spend time with Ziggy and her sister. So Cindy is the oldest sister of Ziggy, and she is basically working because so she can help out her mom with the house and all this other scenario. And I thought that was a very interesting for the character of Cindy Berman. Emily Royal does a really great job as a sister. She is the sister who's hardworking, is trying to do good for her family, trying to make sure that she does fine, and she does a really great job, and she knows exactly what to do, and she is trying to take care of her family, of course, take care of her sister. So I got that aspect with the character of Cindy in this second part of this Fear Street story. Now, Ziggy is the complete opposite. She is basically known as a outcast, pretty much. She is very much an outcast. And she is the one who's telling us, recounting the events of Camp Nightwing. How they rope her to a tree and they accuse of stealing, and they accuse of her being a witch and stuff. And so we see basically all of that, and how she talks back. She gets you quick. She's fast, and she doesn't take crap from anyone. She will call you out, and I think Sadie Sink does a great job in that department as well. But also you have the character of Nick, who also has a kind of sympathy towards the character of Ziggy. I thought she did a really good job. I thought she did very well in the departments of the acting. And the character of Nick, I also very much like. Nick Good, played by Ted Sutherland. I thought he did a great job. You also had McCabe Sly as Tommy Slater. You have Chiara Aurelia as Sheila. So there's a lot of new faces in this second half, while also the returning players. But what I really found the most interesting about the second half is how they take the Friday the 13th idea and they just spin it on its head with a mix of RL Stine. There is a witch going around. I like the darker tone. I like how they decide to go about this in this one. And the killings, my only real issue with the killings this time around is that they're not as creative as the film, as the first movie. And just the kill, and just the axe is just a guy going around with the axe. But you do have a lot of good blood and carnage. And also, it does bring a lot of the great elements back with cinematography and the great directing and the good writing and the characterization of the characters here. And the cinematography and the 70s aesthetic, which has 70s music and the great production design at the camp and the costume design. And this is more of a slow burn this time, but it's a nice slow burn. It wasn't sitting there like I was bored throughout it. My only real issue with this half of the story is I don't think the characters are as interesting as I feel like they should have. The characters I didn't think were very well fleshed out as I thought they could have been, which does downgrade my rating a little bit. But either way you go, Fear Street Part 2 is definitely my favorite of the trilogy. It continues what the first film started. Keeps the great elements of 1994. Sadie Sink is once again great. She's always amazing to watch on screen. And while the kills are not as offensive and you don't get as much characterization for some of these other characters as you want, I still think this is a very great second chapter. And the cliffhanger has me very intrigued on how this third film in the trilogy. So I'm gonna give Fear Street Part 2 an Epictastic. Now we get to the last part of the Fear Street series, and it is Fear Street Part 3, 1666. This is directed by Leigh Janiak, written by the same people as the first two, based on the books by RL Stine. It has the same returning cast players from Parts 1 and Part 2, and this is the final film of the trilogy. So let's get into my thoughts. Sorry about that 1 week delay about this, but here is the last part. As you can tell, different start compared from the first two parts, which were already pre-recorded and pre-edited. In 1666, a colonial town is gripped by a witch hunt that has deadly consequences for creatures to come, in centuries to come, I mean. While teenagers in 1994 try to end the curse once and for all. So as a fan of the first two movies, I wanted to see could they strike the landing with the third movie in the trilogy. When you get to the third movie in the trilogy, usually the third one can either be the best one, or it can either be the worst one, or it could just be the end one. But when it comes to Fear Street's case, this is a case where I can say that this is the third one is actually good. And this might be my second favorite. But let's get off into it. Fear Street Part 3, I saw this at a virtual screener that I was invited to as part of a giveaway that I took part in from Tessa Smith over at Mama's Geeky. But anyways, getting into this last half of the Fear Street trilogy, it is a good way to go out. This is a good way to go out. I like the way they decided to go out at this. They do conclude this with a lot of heart and a lot of respect. What I really like about this is that not only this is the most darkest of the trilogy, but this is easily the most intense of the trilogy. Because each movie of the Fear Street series gets darker and darker. And for that, as it gets darker and darker, it just got very crazy and very scary as throughout. And the way it plays out is very well directed, is very well played out, and you can tell that the director, she is a craft at what she does, and I would definitely be able to see Leigh Janiak do more directorial work, whether it's in this genre or sci-fi or action or comedy or romance. I think she has the talent for it. And thinking into this is my least favorite of the Fear Street trilogy, but it's something about my the least favorite was this series, just like Captain America, where all of them are good, and each movie it builds upon the other one. It goes into some places that you don't really expect to go. It gets scary at times, but let me say the violence. There's not a lot of killing going on here, but the violence is pretty strong here, considering the fact that this was a time period that was pretty dark at times. Think of it as more like before slavery days, if you will, except this isn't slavery. With our main character, she basically been took into a time loop by by this hand that was set up in the first two movies. The hand transports her to 6066, and you see how the Irish town, which I'll get into the Irish accents, how I personally feel about it. But the way they are able to portray this colonial era of what goes on, I think it's very well handled, it's very well structured, and it's very well directed for the most part. It's not completely half-assed. I thought it I thought it did the whole era that this movie needs to do well, a lot better than the American Horror Story syndrome, and it shows how the curse got started. And this is a very slow burn, so I do think that some people will not be all for the slow burn part, but I was into the slow burn part. I really like the whole slow burn build up and reveal how the curse got started, and then showing that these two characters that they were in love, which is one thing I will say I didn't really care too much for. Not because it was bad. I just didn't really think it was that interesting as the story that they were telling. And then the one character that goes on who has these witch powers, and they just during the hanging in this movie was I was sitting there watching the actual hanging in this of one of the characters who started this whole witch curse. The way it's portrayed, she puts a curse on the whole entire town for 300 years, and the way it plays out is very dark, it's very intense, and for that, I thought it was just very, very risk taking. The decision that they go with to do that. It is rated R. It does have its blood. I think the actors from the first two movies does a good job, and the actors in here does a really great job. A lot. The production design, costume design is very well done. Unfortunately, when it gets to another one of my issues, besides the whole love story, I didn't really care for. Well, intended love story, as you see later on, and also it being a bit of a slow burn, which I definitely appreciate, but I did feel like it needs to pick up the pace a little bit. The Irish accents are a bit of a mixed bag. These are American actors doing American accents, and accents for any actor is very hard to pull off. But I thought some of these actors pulled it off very well. Some of it was a little off, but it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like it was off or anything. And also, another thing I very much applaud was once again Malcolm Beltrami's score is great. The cinematography is always good in these three movies. The production design, costume design, editing is good. I do appreciate the fact that this movie has the balls to not only go back to the 1994 era, but also has the balls to actually do what they intend to do. Have the curse end, stop the curse with Gillian Jacobs' version of Sadie Sink's character as a teenager, and have her and have the kids from the first movie, and the other characters at the last act of the movie to just go out and stop this curse once and for all, and that was my favorite part of the movie. I was intrigued with this whole curse scenario, but the ending I thought really is what brought it all home. So in the end, is Fear Street the Part 3 good? Yeah, it's good. It's a third entry into the series that works very well. The performances are really great, and the direction is great. I very much enjoyed what this movie went for. I thought it ended the series very well. It definitely does have its issues, of course, with it being a slow burn, and it. And while it is my least favorite of the trilogy, I still think Fear Street 66 is enough, satisfying enough closing chapters of the Fear Street trilogy, and it brings it all home with a great story, good performances, and goes out in classic RL Stine fashion. Very much enjoyed this a lot, and this is definitely one of my favorite trilogies of all time. And I do hope sometime in the future we do get a physical media release of all three of these movies, because I would definitely like to own it. But I'm gonna give this the same grade as the first movie. I'm gonna give this a better than Vampire Academy. that was my review of the Fear Street Part 3, and that's all my Fear Street reviews in its entirety. So, in the comment section down below, what did you think of my reviews of the Fear Street movies? Did you see them? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Or are you somewhere right in the middle? What is your favorite and least favorite of the Fear Street trilogy? How, all my social media links are in the description box down below. Please be sure to like this video, comment down below on this video. Be sure to share this video. Also, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get notified when news videos are up. Otherwise, you won't get notifications for things like this. And it does help with the algorithm, and it does help this channel grow. And as always, you guys keep it cool, enjoying the Epictasticness.